Good evening and welcome to the Let's Talk Mental Health podcast. Tonight we are delighted to be joined by functional medicine health coach and founder and CEO of WellWorks, Raewyn Gurrero. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for that warm introduction. Nice to see you, James.
It's great to see you as well. And we've been speaking for a while now about getting you on the show to talk about functional medicine and a wee bit about your life and what it is you're doing now. So I'll start off with the first question. For the viewers out there, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you specialise in?
Yeah, so fantastic way to kick off, because I think this will make things, crystallize for people as we go through the show. So I started off studying psychology, and I had moved from the Caribbean to the UK to study. And the reason behind that was because I had a family history of anxiety and dementia. So I was very interested in the brain and how you can use non-pharmaceutical ways to help support mental health conditions so that they don't lead to longer term neurological conditions, which was what I had experienced in my own family. So my grandfather had anxiety. He'd been prescribed anti-anxiety meds for about 20 years without any therapy to go along with it. And that had damaged his brain as he got older, and he suffered from multiple strokes, and that led to his dementia. So my personal family history has been the main driver. And then, of course, I experienced my own epic burnout when I was working in HR at a bank in central London right after I'd come out of university. I'd spent sort of like 10 years there and had my own epic kind of, burnout. And that just kind of... I think that was a big catalyst for me, because, I'd been looking at all these non-pharmaceutical ways of intervening and helping people, and then realizing that, if you're treating the mind, you have to treat the body, because if you get the body right, and then the brain will follow, and then the mind will follow. Yeah. So, it's a very integrative way that I work right now. Like I look at, how to use nutrition to help support mental health, as well as talking therapy. So it's integrative and it's combined, and it's accumulation of, 20 years of my own research and my own experiences.
Which is absolutely amazing. And we were speaking about nutrition as well off air. Prior to this, we had a conversation, about you coming on the show, and nutrition's something that I've always, had an interest in with regards to, my physical well-being and, bodybuilding in the past. So can you tell the viewers out there how important it is that nutrition is beneficial for your mind?
Yeah. So interesting that you were a bodybuilder, because that was my grandfather as well. He was very physically fit, and you would think that because he was physically fit, that would mean that his psychology would be in a good place. However, back then, it was after the war and stuff. So people just used to eat as much as they could in order to be able to feel full and satisfied, because there was scarcity prior to, when the war was going on. So once that was over, then it was like, eat everything in sight, sort of like that standard Western diet of lots of bread and pasta and a lot of, hydrogenated oils and all these things that are actually quite detrimental and quite inflammatory. So if your body is inflamed because you're consuming foods that are inflammatory, so, and when I say inflammatory foods, things that like wreck your blood sugar, for example, wrecking blood sugar is probably one of the number one culprits underlying most diseases, and that leads to the most inflammation. And a lot of people don't realize that when I talk about blood sugar and foods that damage it, I'm talking about things like, not just table sugar, by the way, not just white sugar, but like white rice, pasta, white potatoes, potato chips, processed foods. Those are very highly inflammatory foods. And that can have a knock-on effect of destabilizing your blood sugar and destabilizing your mood, because it impacts your cortisol, which is your stress hormone. So blood sugar and cortisol have this very intimate relationship. So if you've got one out of whack, it's going to knock the other one out of whack. And then when cortisol's out of whack, it knocks your hormones out of whack as well. So, if you're eating foods that are creating inflammation and creating spikes in your blood sugar, then you're going to have this knock-on effect with the rest of these other chemicals in the body. And then it impacts your neurotransmitters. And the reason behind that is that gut brain connection. And you and I talked about that when we first met, and that you were like fascinated by it.
Yeah,
And it was the
yeah.
thing that fascinated me as well, because I got diagnosed with IBS in 2011, and I'd seen a very famous gastroenterologist on Harley Street in London that my, health insurance had pushed me toward. And she didn't really give me very much answers. She just, she ran a couple of labs, did a scan or two. She just said like, oh, I think you should probably avoid sugar. That's what she said, just avoid sugar. And then she kind of sent me on my way. And I wasn't really satisfied with that kind of diagnosis or that way of being treated. I couldn't even follow up with her because she did not have an email address. She had a fax number, and I'd have to fax her assistant. And all of those things, like throughout my journey, they kind of motivated me to provide, to create a service for people where they don't feel lost and at sea after they come out of a specialist's office, after they've forked out. Back then I spent £450 seeing her for an hour, and I didn't feel like I got anything out of it. So she didn't explain anything about the gut brain connection. She didn't explain anything about the fact that there is this vagus nerve, this super highway running from the gut to the brain that's transporting 90% of your serotonin, 50% of your GABA. Now, serotonin is your happy neurotransmitter, and it's the one that people tend to know a lot about. It's the one that's impacted in depression and impacted in anxiety and impacted in poor sleep or insomnia. And if you're eating foods that are damaging your gut and damaging, like inflammatory foods, it's not going to help with the production of these happy neurotransmitters, these chemicals that keep you happy, right? Or that keep you relaxed or keep you asleep. So like GABA is the relaxation one. And if 50% of it is produced in your gut, then and you're eating the wrong foods, or you're eating foods that are not promoting health and promoting inflammation, then you're more likely to be suffering from mood disorders, as well as, things like just putting on weight and not being able to shift it, or having hormonal imbalances. So I have spent the last 15 years just investigating all of this stuff and connecting the dots, which is what I think the traditional Western model doesn't necessarily do. They're very keen to give you a diagnosis and then match a pill to that diagnosis without looking at, your entire lifestyle. And which is why I fell into functional medicine, because I kept looking for answers, because I knew that it couldn't be isolated to just this one thing. That lady, that gastroenterologist had told me, she said, oh, well, it's probably because you have a high stress job that, you're experiencing these symptoms.
Of course.
And I was like, it can't be that, because, I was practicing meditation at the time. I had trained as a hypnotherapist. I had a really active life as well. And at the time, I really did like my job, even though it was pretty stressful. It was very busy. It was in Canary Wharf, and, you were in meetings all the time. And there was a lot of, it was kind of like you're on a hamster wheel, you're kind of running from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and not really having a lot of time for recovery, which I've learned all about now, and how that impacts the gut as well and keeps your cortisol levels down. So food is a big factor in all of that. So I look at everything that a person is doing in their life. So their food, what's nourishing them from a spiritual perspective as well. Are they doing something that gives them energy, that lights them up, that gives them joy? Because you need to be doing these things to be able to live a life in balance. Because ultimately, inflammation is usually when we're in a state of fight or flight, right? And rest and digest is that healing state. So what we want to be doing more of is entering that state of rest and digest. And with our current modern lives, even during a lockdown, even when we're stuck at home, so many people I know are saying like, I don't even have time to breathe between Zoom meetings. I don't have time to pee. I don't have time to eat. I don't have time. And it's almost like, because you're at home, your bosses expect that you're going to work longer. They expect that you're not going to be taking a full lunch break, because they're like, you don't need to, because you're at home. And you're not getting to build in that time to nourish and support yourself psychologically as well as physiologically. Because physiologically, we need breaks. Like scheduled recovery is a thing. Famous athletes, professional athletes do that. They schedule, you will know this, like being an athlete, you will schedule recovery because you need to rest in order to grow your muscles.
See, Cristiano Ronaldo, he actually sleeps I think it's 90 minutes, like every day at certain points of the day, which is, tremendous. His body, his physique what he eats is testament to who he is, you know, and it's
and his performance at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And you'll see it like with famous tennis players, you know, and like you said, even the rugby players. I remember I went to a rugby match in Wales in 2015, I think, and those guys, I mean, they are so strict, like about what they eat, how they recover, all those things. Like we weren't going to go out with them because one of my friends, her brother was on the Welsh rugby team, and we thought we were going to be able to hang out with them afterward. And of course we couldn't, because they had another match in like a couple of days. So they have to like go to bed at a certain time. There's no drinking, you know, all the things that you would think that were associated with rugby, like going out for it's not like, not when they're in high performance mode, when they have games and matches. And people in everyday lives, like, we don't have to be rugby players, but in the same way that they're taking care of themselves because they want to be at their absolute best and be sharp and be able to perform, you know, people who are doing desk work, you know, we are being, you know, we're not physical laborers, but we're being employed for what's above our necks. And we need to be able to keep that sharp and keep it working well. And the best way to do that is to actually give it what it needs. And that's adequate rest, good water, clean food, you know, sunlight, so important. And you're probably hearing a lot now about vitamin D because of this whole COVID pandemic, right?
That's something that I take every day, is
amazing.
vitamin D, you know, and it makes me feel great.
And that's the thing, right? A lot of people don't realize like how deficient they are in vitamin D, and that certain nationalities and ethnicities require more of it than other people. So, and also geography. So if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere, you're going to require more than the recommended daily guidelines around it, right? So, and again, it should be individualized and personalized. And that's one beautiful thing about functional medicine. Like, we recommend, like, you should be testing to make sure that you are getting exactly what you need, so that you're not just, you know, throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that it's going to stick. So if someone asked me a couple of days ago, she said, "Oh, I'm taking it day. I'm taking this, you know, 2,000 IUs every day. Do you think I should keep doing that?" I said, "Well, why'd you start taking 2,000 IUs every day?" You know, I said, "And how do you feel taking it?" And she said, "Well, I feel pretty good, because it was, you know, I think I was very low or deficient in it about 3 years ago." I said, "Have you tested since then?" She's like, "No, I haven't done anything." I said, "Well, maybe test, and then you can know if you need to keep taking it every day, or if you want to space it out, or, you know, because there is such a thing as vitamin D toxicity. And
too much.
You have to be exactly. You've got to be There are only like two, like vitamin C and magnesium are probably the only two vitamins and minerals that you can like overdose on safely, because what happens is that your body just kicks it out. Like, if you've taken too much, you will go to the bathroom. It will just get rid of it. Whereas things like zinc, which I know a lot of people are ODing on now as well because of the whole COVID thing, because, you know, zinc is an immunity mineral, a healing mineral, but people are ODing on that, and it's kind of knocking their copper ratios out of balance as well. So again, test before you start taking these things, or work with someone who understands like the proper ratios, rather than just like, I'm going to run to Holland & Barrett or Costco and pick up whatever's on the shelf and just start like swallowing loads of supplements.
You need to research.
You need to research, and you need guidance. You need expert guidance, because this is, you know, like I can't fix cars, so I'm not going to try and diagnose a problem with my car on my own just by going on YouTube. That's not, I mean, I might get some guidance on it, but I'm probably not going to know everything about it, and I might screw up the car more than, do you know what I'm saying? Like, totally. So if I use Dr. Google to figure things out, it's probably not the best use of my time. If I use Dr. Google to find someone who's an expert to help me figure things out, that's totally different. But to just be like reading, you know, classic example, met someone a couple of weeks ago, and he's got terrible eczema, like really awful, like from head to toe, you know, itching, scratching, swelling all over, which is linked to the gut, by the way, and to diet. But, you know, he didn't know that, because he's a businessman and didn't really understand. And he said that he said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm going to have a bleach bath later tonight, and it will sort it right out."
A bleach bath?
I said, "What you going to do?" I was like, "What are you doing? You're going to have a what?" And he said, "Well, I found this thing on the internet where it says that the bleach kills the bacteria from the eczema. And then I sit in a bath with, you know, a cup and a half of bleach to like sort my skin out." And I thought, I help people with eczema all the time, just from cleaning up their gut, from their digestion. And eczema is not like it's not a bacterial infection on your
Yeah.
skin. That's like staph or MRSA or something, like that's a bacterial infection. But that's not what eczema is. If anything, it's probably fungus, and you want to, and it's an internal fungus that's just showing up on your skin, and you want to work on that.
Is that like psoriasis as well, Raewyn? Is that?
So psoriasis is an interesting one too, because it can be brought on by a number of things. One thing is like eating nightshade. So again, linked to certain foods that you're eating, or even, being a celiac. And I know that for, my dad is a celiac, and but I found out about it after, because he had psoriasis for years, and this was before functional medicine for me as well. And it was when I started studying functional medicine. I was like, hey, what if you cut out gluten? Let's see what happens. And then he did, and then his psoriasis went away.
Wow.
So, and then later on, like a couple of years later, I gave him and my whole family DNA tests where they had to spit into a test tube. And when he got the results for it, and I ran some analysis on it, I saw that he had 2 of the genes for celiac disease. And I was like, okay. This makes sense now, that celiacs can't have gluten because it affects their skin in a big way.
I mean, I remember speaking to you when the first time we spoke on Zoom, and I was speaking to you about alkaline diet, and that's something that I've been introducing into my life quite a lot. All I do, I drink spring water. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Highland Spring. But
but you should be, now that you've been showing off. They're like, hey, sponsor my show.
All I do, I mean, I drink spring water now. I mean, the tap water we have here is fine, but I tend to kind of drink spring water, and I eat a lot of mushrooms, avocados, and quite a lot of stuff,
vegetables,
alkaline, key limes and stuff like that. Could you kind of elaborate on that, on alkaline? I don't know kind of where you would sit with that. There are a couple of schools of thought on this. There are some people in my industry who think like, oh yeah, having an alkaline diet is the number one way to save you from cancer. There's some people who think it's absolute rubbish, like some very top nutritionists who just slate it completely. I think the research is still out on it. Totally. But here's how I look at some of these things. Like, if you try something and you feel better on it and it's working for you, then go for it, right? So if you're eating more avocados and more mushrooms and having more vegetables, green vegetables in your diet makes you feel good, then keep doing that, right? Like, if it gives you, and the way that you know that you're feeling good, and it's not like the good that you feel from eating a cupcake where you get like a sugar high. That's not, I'm talking about like having sustained energy. Like when you're like, actually, I feel like I could probably run a marathon, or I'm getting really good quality sleep. Like when I eat a certain way, I realize that my sleep's improved, or that my mood's improved. And I give you a story about a lady who had come to see me for depression. Right. And she had a number of health problems. And in my intake forms, I take a really comprehensive look at everything that's going on with your health, not just the current symptoms. I look at your whole family history, everything, like even down to if you were breastfed or not, because that plays a part in the development of your microbiome. And she told me a bunch of things about, the way that she was eating, the medications that she was on. And after running maybe about 6 or 8 sessions of hypnotherapy, because I was practicing CBT hypnotherapy with her at the time, I said, why don't we run a gut health test? I said, because these techniques, they tend to work really fast once there's nothing underlying. And I think something is going on, because you're talking about bloating, you're talking about diarrhea, you're talking about headaches. I feel like something else is at play here. So let's have a look at internally what's happening with you. And I explained the gut-brain connection and everything to her. So we did that. And then what we ended up finding out was that, she had parasites, she had a worm, and she had been traveling back and forth every year to the Far East. Like, she and her husband, they would do that as their anniversary. They'd go to Sri Lanka or the Maldives or Thailand. So they would always do that once a year. And I think she had been depressed for about 15 years, and she'd been on medication for a long time. And just sort of like 6 weeks into our protocol, she started weaning herself off her meds. Obviously, I work with a medical doctor, by the way, so I never do these kinds of things unsupervised. So she was being supervised by our medical doctor. But she was weaning herself off her meds just from sort of like changing the way that she was eating. And, she had basically given up all the starches. And she was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I said, don't worry. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help you get through it, and we can create strategies around it. And you're going to be taking some supplements that are designed to wipe out the nasty
bugs that have set up shop
totally.
in you. And I don't think a lot of people understand this. And I'm really keen to share this, because when someone says, oh, I don't think I have the willpower to give up sweets, I'm like, well, you aren't actually the one craving the sweets, because 57% of your DNA is actually, you know, fungus, yeast, bacteria. It's not actually human. And those things override like your own human impulses, because they crave sugar to survive. Exactly. They crave it. So when you start to wipe them out, then your sugar cravings immediately go away. That kind of blood sugar roller coaster we were talking. And with her, that's exactly what happened. She started shedding weight like crazy after that. She lost about 15 pounds in like in about 6 weeks. She started shedding because she'd been a little bit heavier. And she said, like, I just woke up one day and my brain is clear. Like, I'm not sad. I have energy. And I think it's because of how I'm eating. And I said, well, it's the combination of how you're eating, where we kind of just start including a lot more dark leafy greens into her diet, because they're full of B vitamins, full of magnesium, all the things that you kind of need for your brain to function well and for you to have energy. So her sleep had improved tremendously. Her energy levels had improved. Her brain fog and depression had lifted. And like I said, 6 weeks in, just after running the labs, changing the diet, adding in the supplements, and continuing the talking therapy sessions.
Of course.
But that integrative approach, it worked like a treat for her. And she just, the one thing she'd said was like, I wish I had done this 15 years ago, rather than being on the pills. Yeah, she said, rather than being on the pills for so long. So, the alkaline argument is, yes, if you eat more alkaline rich foods, you should have more energy, and you should create an environment that is anti-inflammatory, because like I said at the start, inflammation is the thing that can cause so much distress as we, throughout our lives. Inflammation is kind of like at the root of all these illnesses that we're seeing in the world right now, not just like cancer or diabetes or obesity, but like depression, mental health, mood disorders, anxiety. In fact, there are a couple of studies, I'm trying to remember the exact details of them, but they've looked at people with inflamed brains, and they've looked at their guts, and the gut is inflamed, and then the brain is inflamed, and they, as a consequence, are depressed. So depression was linked to inflammatory and an inflamed gut.
I can agree with that. This is such an amazing subject, because I'm so big on nutrition. I love this. I absolutely love this. And I totally believe that the brain and the gut are connected in so many ways, and we just aren't privy to that, over here, and I wish we were, I wish more people were.
That's why I wanted to talk about it, because I feel like so many mental health professionals focus only on raising stigma and not so much about, well, what can you do if you do have a diagnosis? What does the diagnosis mean? Does it mean you're stuck with that label for life? Or does it mean that, okay, now that you know what you've got, now you can start doing something about it, start doing some investigative work into why? And I always say functional medicine is the medicine of why. I was like, okay, well, what has got you here? Why are you presenting with these symptoms? Why are you sad? Why do you have low energy? Why are you crying? Why are you volatile with your emotions? Why, is it the hormones? Is it something going on internally? What have you been exposed to? Obviously, trauma plays a big part of that. And funnily enough, a lot of the people that I have treated for, some people, so again, chicken and egg situation, you just never really know which one you're dealing with when someone first presents. They might say, oh, I'm suffering with depression. And then you find out it's a parasite that's causing the depression. Or they show up and they say, I'm suffering with constipation. And you find out 25 years ago, or one lady 50 years ago, she had been, raped as a teenager. And ever since then hadn't been able to, go to the bathroom without, laxatives or support. So, the trauma has a huge impact as well on how the body responds. So I tend to find that a lot of my clients with physical symptoms don't have the strength, or haven't been able to find the space in their lives to investigate or to deeply look into their, psychological history. For whatever reason.
Haven't you?
You've got to be brave. I think you have to be brave to be able to look back and say, okay, something happened at this point, and and again connect those dots. And that's why a big part of my intake process is asking people to complete something called a timeline. So I get them to basically chronologically list all the things that have happened to them across their lives, good or bad, physical or emotional, whether you fell off a tree or your mother gave birth to a brother that you hated, do you know what I mean? Just like whatever it is, whatever, and then start mapping out corresponding emotions to the life event. And then we kind of put it into a chronological order. And it helps as well with us seeing like when certain symptoms appeared, like, well, when did you start feeling sad, or when did you start having this anxiety? When did this occur? When we look back, and that's kind of one of the only times I actually really like looking back, because that's when we can see, that's the moment that this began. And then we're able to kind of unlock it from there, because then you're like, you're only playing that out in your current existence because of something that happened to you 15, 20 years ago. But you don't need to do that anymore, because that is a response that, your body or your mind had put in place to protect you for that situation, but it's no longer necessary. And you've got to kind of come to that place where you're looking at yourself with compassion and understanding, and just being open to the fact that, okay, I don't need to react in this way any longer. Like the threat is no longer present, and I can respond in a different way. So that's sort of like the mental, emotional aspect. And then of course the physiological and biochemical aspect or neurochemical aspect is, all right, and what are the foods that I can eat that can nourish me and support my mental health and support my brain health?
So can we talk about empowerment? Because when we were off air, we were speaking about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about empowerment. What's on your mind with that? Because it's something that I love to talk about. It really is.
Well, I think if you believe that the best investment you can ever make is in yourself, then you'll understand that, if you have to look at every experience that you've ever been through with a mindset that's like, okay, what is this here to teach me? What is this here to educate me on? What is this here to shine a light on? What am I here to learn from this whole thing? And then you'll be like, okay, well, I'm prepared to like spend time investigating this. I'm prepared to spend time understanding why this has happened and how I can learn and grow from it. That's where I think the piece around, mental health needs to evolve into. Because I feel like the current just like sitting around and talking about your sadness, or talking about or why you're sad, or just rehashing the past. I feel it kind of disempowers you, because the label is disempowering in itself. It's like it takes away, it puts you in victim mode straight away, right? And it doesn't. The education piece that I'm very keen on is like, okay, well, yeah, you've been given this diagnosis. Now what can you do about it, right? Rather than, and a client I had yesterday, lovely girl, same sort of story, had a very traumatic childhood, a very traumatic divorce, and is now in a place where she's got tremendous gut health problems. But she's been seeing a counselor for maybe about a year. And she said it just got too much for her, because she said, all we did was just spend time rehashing the past. And all I wanted to do was lie down and cry. And, I don't want to go backwards. I want to look forward. And I said, well, that's what I love about coaching, because it is all about like, okay, I understand where you've come from, but where do you want to get to?
Yeah.
Exactly. Where do you want to get to? And that's what I feel empowerment's about. It's about saying, okay, I am bruised and battered from this experience, but I am going to learn how to pick myself up and learn all the things that I can do to use it to fuel and drive me forward rather than hold me back. And food is a big part of that, but also, how you think about it is also a part of it too. And you should be working with someone who understands that, rather than trying to keep you in that space of, okay, well, let's like peel off another layer of the onion of your pain, and let's keep going into that and spend another 12 weeks talking about how sad and frustrated and angry you are. And with her, she said she prefers work. She didn't fire her counselor. That wasn't what happened. But she just said, I'm taking a break from the counseling because I prefer doing this, because I feel like I'm taking more action. And I think that's what empowerment's about. It's about taking right action as well, not just random action, taking right action, and having someone in your corner who understands that and who helps you achieve that, who says, okay, well, if this is where you want to go, let's see how we're going to get you there. Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's what I love about empowerment,
Yeah. And I think women are very good at it, like really, really good at sort of like turning lemons into lemonade.
Yeah. Women are a different species, though. They're so much powerful than men are.
Well, we're creators, ultimately we are creators. Yeah. We hold life within us. So we're always extremely good at like like at alchemy, just
Yeah.
kind of like turning something that's crappy into something amazing, and looking at it and be like, okay, how can we turn this around? And, classic example, my grandmother, I want to talk about her. Her birthday is actually tomorrow, but she's passed away for like, since 2016. So 4 years now she's been gone. And I would usually fly back to Trinidad for her birthday because that's where I grew up. And it would always be the one thing that would anchor me back to my roots, like being around her. Because she was such a phenomenal force of nature. She had to leave school when she was 12 years old because her father died and her mother didn't work. And they had a lot of money when up until then, but he'd had a ton of gambling debt. So when he died, they lost their house. They were on the street, like people had to take them in. It was her mother and her brother and 2 half sisters. And her mother was taking care of the half sisters as well, even though her husband had been unfaithful. But, it was like this whole little unit. They were all like, having to figure out like, where's their next meal going to come from? Yeah. And she turned everything around. Like she was so amazing because she was 12 years old. She started to work at 12, right? She didn't finish school, right? And she ended up like dying like a millionaire. It was an amazing story.
Amazing story, yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
like in her 60s, because she made a couple of investments. She'd bought some land and stuff like in her 30s, and they ended up never doing anything with it, but they ended up selling it like about 25 years later when it had appreciated and she was retired. And, she was on a fixed income, and then someone came with her with an offer because she was just holding on to this land for whatever reason, came at her with an offer. And she was just sort of like, oh, okay. Like, I can't believe somebody, I paid whatever, like 20 grand for it 25 years ago. And now you want to give me how much money? She's like, okay, no brainer. I have grandchildren. Here you go. So, and, she just had this mindset of like being of persevering, of always learning. And when I moved to England, I was engaged, and he and we'd known each other since I was like 4 years old. My first love, blah, blah, blah. And he decided to move to England from Trinidad because it was like the big wide world. He wanted to see it. And he's like, we're going to conquer it together. It didn't work out. Like, 6 months of living with him. And I thought I was going to, lose my mind. And I called her and I said, what do I do? I said, I feel so terrible. I'm like in England. It's cold. It's miserable. Like she said, girl, you have an opportunity. You can go to university. You can do anything you want. She said, she's like, don't come back. Like she said, go and figure yourself out, figure it out. She's like, he's given as well. She said, she actually said he gave you a gift. She's like, even though it didn't work out with you, he gave you a gift. And I think now, like when, silly things happen or things that are not pleasant, you kind of have to look at, okay, well, what's the message from this mess? And Tony Robbins uses that expression a lot. What is the message from your mess? And like, how can you turn it around? And, people have gone through worse things than me, than breaking up with a boy or, and some of my clients have been through really horrific things, but they become so empowered and so resilient because they seek, they come to me with the mindset of like, okay, something crappy has happened and I am really in a bad place, but how do I turn this around? Because I don't want this to be the defining factor in my life, at least not in a negative way. Right. Mm-hmm.
It's tremendous. Honestly, it's like so empowering to have that, and wow, what a story. I mean, we could go on all night, but there's a question that I do want to ask you before we wrap it up, because I know you've not got all night. What do you enjoy most about your job? And, obviously working in mental health, working in, mind and gut health, what's the most joyful thing that you take away from it?
I think after I see how long some people have been suffering, and then they start to work with me and we can turn things around so fast. Like once we get really, and I think that's the thing, the personalization aspect, like when you actually know exactly what you're dealing with and you know what you can eat, what you can do, rather than, just kind of like fumbling around in the dark, trying to figure it out on your own. I think that clarity that they get and the results that happen so fast. And when, after like, let's say 14 days, we have a session and they're like, do you know what? I'm feeling so much better already. And I can't believe it because I never thought it was possible. Like that to me, like when you can turn someone's outlook on life around, and you can turn around their energy, and you can turn around, the way that they're sleeping as well, and the way that they're starting to feel. Because some people, like very quickly, like I had one lady who just came to me to deal with the fact that she had no energy. And by the end of our 90 days of working together, she said, look, she's like, the only expectation I had out of this was that you were going to help me get more energy, because I was just so tired of being tired.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, like her migraines had completely or almost evaporated. She used to be going to a migraine clinic in London. I didn't even know she had, like, that was an issue for her, but they disappeared like within 4 weeks. Her periods like completely transformed. She said normally she'd have to take 3 days out and lie in a room. And she said, I had energy every single month. I didn't have to take time off from my kids. I could hang out with them. She said my periods changed. My energy obviously changed. She said my headaches vanished. She said my joint pain disappeared. She said, and all I wanted was to work on my energy. But in the space of like 4 to 6 weeks, all this stuff transformed for her. And the beauty of that was, like, once we'd gotten that, the pain and all the physical things out of the way, then we were able to focus on, like, well, okay, now that you have all this energy, like, what are you going to do with it? Like, what's your purpose? Where are you headed with all of this great stuff? Yeah. And she said, I've never had the chance to think about any of that, because I've been raising kids, I've been in school, and I've never really had the bandwidth because I'm always so wiped out. She said, and now I can actually think about, well, what do I want to do next? And, the rest of our sessions for the 6 weeks, we had like the first 6 weeks working on the food and stuff. And then the following 6 weeks, it was like crafting a plan for her life. Like, what is it you're going to do next? And who do you want to be? And what potential have you not realized that you can do now, because you have all this energy and your fog is lifted? So for me, that's one of the most inspiring things when a woman, is suddenly like, wow, I now feel like Superwoman. And I love kind of waking that up in people. That's probably the most exciting part of my job, when I can see someone suddenly shining with life, and, they've got their zest for life again. And it never gets old. I mean, I've been doing this forever, and it doesn't get old.
No, so you're giving people a new perspective on life, which is completely amazing. It's fantastic. And it's what we're taking away from here is it's not just about gut and brain health. What it's about is empowering as well, and it's giving people a new perspective in life. And your work is fantastic, Raewyn. I really appreciate you coming on. And for the viewers out there, where can they reach you, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so my website is well-works.co. And I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I have a wonderful Facebook community that is very vibrant, and we're always doing fun things with each other. Like, we ran a Find Your Joy 28-day challenge at the start of the last lockdown, and it ran until the end of the lockdown. So we do things like that. We do food challenges as well. I host weekly videos. I'm hosting one tomorrow as well, all about self-care and how to superwoman your self-care. So there's a lot of like activity that goes on in there if you're a member of the group. So that's facebook.com/groups/wellworks, all one word. So those are the ways to reach out to me.
Yeah, and I'll add your links to the Facebook page as well, so people can get in contact with you. And listen, it's been an absolute honour having you on.
Thank you so much. I've loved this. I've loved being able to talk to you and to talk to your viewers. And I hope that I've given people a message of that there is hope, and that you're not stuck with a diagnosis.
Yeah, that's true. And listen, hopefully we can work together on the future, and get you on again. And it'd be so great to have your expertise and your knowledge on here. And I think people would listen, especially women. It's all about the women tonight as well.
Just in honor of my granny, in honor of her.
Totally, totally.
Yeah, December's her month. I always feel very connected to her during December. And I always feel like it's a great month as well to kind of reevaluate, like, where you're headed in your life, because the new year is coming. So empowerment's the name of the game. So thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And all that's left for me to say is, we've been Let's Talk Mental Health, and good night and God bless. Thank you.